Here we go. Hi, friends. Hope you're ready for the next hour. I am. It's going to be a great discussion. We got some awesome dudes on the call tonight. So welcome to the Coach's Corner. Our topic tonight is breakthrough speed in 2025, how we're going to find it. Brought to you by 1080 Motion. I'm your host, Adam Rolfe. Thrilled to be here. Excited to have this chat. We already had a good little warm up before we see all you good folks, but tonight we're going to focus on speed, where to find, develop, and translate it into performance. We're going to have an incredible line of panelists. I'm going to go through them real quick. I hope you guys already know who these people are, but if not, Chris Korfist, he's out of Chicago, Illinois. Slow Guy Speed School, founder of TFC. Matthew Neal, if you don't know Matt, awesome speed coach down in Austin, Texas. Xceleration Performance Lab, check it out. It's ybslow.com. I love it. And then Mr. Dietz, head of performance, strength coach, tells me he likes faking being a strength coach at the University of Minnesota and USA Hockey. But he also has a new book out with Dr. Mike T. Nelson, Triphasic Training 2. Check it out. Definitely want these guys to get to plug what they're doing. We really appreciate them jumping on the call and just sharing their thoughts. So, gentlemen, good evening. Thank you again for joining us. As we settle into our conversation, Ola, Erickson, my colleagues are going to help me with questions. So I do like to remind people, when we do these little coaches calls, please put some questions in the Q&A. This is your chance. This is not a podcast. This is live. This is where we get to actually dig into stuff, ask questions, see what you have on your mind. So, guys, let's get this thing going. So first thing up, my first question, I've been thinking about it all day as I've been in a plane flying to Penn State today. Number one, and Chris, I want you to kick this off for us. What are you thinking about for developing speed right now? Like what is the one thing that when you go to bed at night thinking about speed that you are like, I need to learn this, I need to figure this out? What's the itch you are scratching?
Why am I wasting so much time trying to figure out speed?
Love
it. Right now, I am interested in the foot velocity coming off the ground. I'm interested in hip flexors. I'm interested in the part that we've been, going away from for a long time because someone said we shouldn't have butts in front. And so why work hip flexors? Why work bringing the leg through? And if we're going to look at Ken Clark's work about the leg coming down into the ground with as much velocity as possible, we forget that velocity has to be slowed. If we go backwards from the contact, that velocity comes from the foot coming off the ground, because when the knee is at midpoint, that is peak velocity for that swing leg. At that point, it decelerates by 78%. And then whatever's left after that is the velocity of that leg coming to the ground, which is usually about 80% of your max velocity. So what I want to do is I want to think about how fast can I get that leg off the ground. I know there's tension with the foot coming off. I know there's guidance with the foot coming off, but how much can that hip flexor, which is your iliopsoas complex, it's your rec fem, and even your hamstring, your semitendinosus, that's bringing that leg through. And so I want to try to develop that, because on my, whether I'm doing a right-left analysis on my sprint machine, what do you call my old one now? It's a retro.
It's the legend.
The legend. Or if I have kids pulling through on my synchro and I've got their ankle hooked up, really fast kids have really good velocities and really good frequency coming through, and slow kids don't. And you can put them in a weight room and they can lift a lot of weight, or they can push a lot of weight. But that's what I'm playing with right now. Matt Neal didn't help me by putting one post out where he's kicking into a machine, and I've been messing with that since I saw that post back in May. And then he's 3.0, so now I'm behind. But yeah, that was the other thing that I thought was really cool. And I think that was really interesting too.
Matt, what do you think about that? What are you diving down? So let's talk about your 3.0 a little
bit. Well, it's kind of the same thing we've been embarking on for the last couple of decades, which is just the 0 step and setting up everything. So we still getting more excited every year that comes along to do something different with it. and it keeps evolving, and we keep learning more. And part of that, no plug to 1080, but when we got the update on the software, where it used to, when the starting point was a green line, I don't know how many people remember that, and the measuring, all the measuring, timing, everything would start when you crossed that line. Well, once that got changed, we started seeing some different stuff. And we're like, oh, wow, wait a minute, what's going on here? And we saw this little squiggle. And I don't know if you guys have noticed that, but there's a nice little squiggle there because it's picking up everything, which is some of the most important data, the most important information that you could pay attention to. Because what happens in the first step, which we call the 0 step, is sets up everything else.
Sure does.
So we've kind of just dove into that even deeper, which is what we've been doing forever. And we started learning even more and more. And part of that I have to give up to, and they didn't ask me to plug anything on 1080, but it's a kind of, as much as we use it, the amount of data we've collected over the last 10 years with it, and then you start to see different things. You're like, oh, wait a minute, what is this? And that little squiggle is actually vertical hip displacement. And we have been, throughout the years, we're always trying to find the best drill or the best technique or the best verbiage or explanation on how to get people to get that horizontal, hip projection out of their 0 step. Well, we noticed how big it was actually by looking at that little squiggle line. And at first we were trying to figure out, what is this squiggle? Where did this come from? And that's what we call it famously now. It's like, they got rid of the squiggle. So when somebody gets rid of it, we're like, they lost the squiggle. Technical term there. But obviously it's a deceleration. And we want that to be clean, and to lose that, to get rid of that, because that means they're getting vertical hip displacement, which means they're obviously not in the most efficient place they can be on their next contact or their first contact to the ground, which from there on is kind of degraded. So this year we are diving even deeper into that. And when he's talking about the machine that we built to use the synchro with, to connect to the synchro, what we learned is as many great cues that you can find, as many awesome teachers we have in our facility that really dive down into things. And mind you, we do things private. We don't do any group stuff. We do all one-on-one development. So it's a little bit different environment than what strength conditioning coaches and other people would be used to. But it allows us to have a little bit more insight into what individual changes you can make. So we learned that, this last year, we think no matter how great you are in all of these different drills and cues and stuff, well, we're still fighting against anatomy. We're still fighting against, especially when you're dealing with team sport athletes that start strength training at a very young age and become very quad dominant, or very, where they're super strong at knee extension and maybe not so much at hip extension. And so when they push into the ground with impulse hard with intensity, well, they straighten that knee out and that hip goes up. And so even though we've been working on that forever, we just saw a little bit different insight into it. And so that's why we were developing that machine, Chris, that you were talking about, on trying to change some of those neurological patterns to firing in different, forcing people to fire into different ways. Because one of the things that we talk about, which might be a controversial thing, I'm not sure it should be, but one of the things we have to start with when you're teaching speed is that there are no natural sprinters. In particular, I'm talking about acceleration. Humans don't accelerate naturally. There's mechanically, right? The most efficient form of acceleration isn't something people naturally do. Now, there are people that are faster than other people, obviously, but they're usually getting away with the same mechanics that everyone else has due to their physiological properties, right? So there's the biomechanical side, there's the physiological side. And the reason it's great to collect data is so that you can see, well, how much do we have on the physiological side versus the biomechanical side and the mechanics of it. So for us, this year, we're diving into the same thing we've been diving into, because we need to get that first step correct first. And when you're talking about whether it's track, team sports, across the board. Without that, nothing else matters. Like we always say, you can't put the genie back in the bottle once you take that first step. It's that limb sequencing gets off from there. So
yeah, with the data that I get from the 1080, I talked about it when I was in Stanford. 3.0, you got to hit your peak bump's got to be at least 3.0 meters a second. If not, you haven't got the velocity to get through that threshold of getting in the right position.
right.
So you can do, like you said, you can do every drill, you can do everything in the world, but until you hit that threshold, everything's a waste of time.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say everything's not a waste of time,
Yeah,
but
those are some strong words. Everything's a waste of time. But
Everything.
I'm gonna pull Cal in here for a second, because Cal, are you thinking, like, are you looking at that first 0 step as the main thing, or are you digging somewhere else right now?
Well, no, I'm kind of looking at a broad spectrum. So what I've done recently is I just cut my 30-meter sprint into parts, and I've been profiling in various sections, right? So which then you should probably profile, which 3.0 Chris taught me, and that's the goal, right? So the 1080 profile, like it's where we started, but now I realize I need to profile at different, at the 10, I need to profile from 10 to 20. I need to profile from 20, 30, because those are completely different qualities. So if I parse out that and I profile, and then kind of, talking about with Matt, with the squiggle, right? Like, basically what I'm doing is I find discrepancies. So let's say I got here's how it works in my gym with this performance group and my interns with the 1080. Today, let's say we're tagging everything instead of just adjusting loads for people when they walk up. We have it wrote down. So we tag everybody, and then as we tag it, somebody's with another laptop, we can just go, hey, there's a 12% deficit in this kid, right to left leg. So then what I do is I just get them on the table, and 80% of the time, and this takes 5 seconds to confirm, I'll do a glute med test, muscle test, and I'll do a TFL muscle test, which is RPR muscle testing, right? And when I test that, if there's a discrepancy, I'm telling you 80 to 90% of the time, those two muscles are off. And those two muscles are just indicators of the stability of that leg. So, I'll use RPR, turn on those muscles, and really it's the slings there that those muscles lie on.
I think he froze, literally.
Froze.
You did.
Because it's 14 below up there.
RPR, it's too cold out there in Minnesota.
They'll be back. They'll be back. Well, let's kick that into, we'll let Cal get back on. But if he's turning on the TFL and the glute med, so I'm going to go into that. Okay, so for you guys, are you looking at, we got to turn those muscles on before we do the first step, or do you even worry about that? Because I think that's where he was kind of going, is like, if we're gonna see a effective change, like, where do we start? Where's ground zero for speed development? Because I heard from both of you, Matt and Chris, like, we got to do the first step really matters. Like, we're evaluating, but we're also going to train it, right? So maybe jump in on that, like, because I do want to dig into this a little bit of this first step. Because Chris, when you were in New York at Stanford at our clinic, and you dove into this first step, like really looking and evaluating it, I do want to think about like how we're training that. So if, like Cal said, we're turning on those muscles, are you doing anything very specific for those athletes to improve running, doing that 0 step?
Well, I can tell you that, one of the things that we're doing is that's where we're talking about so if you look at like when I said humans don't accelerate naturally. So, obviously when you look at like if you look at like that Kaiser air runner, or like some of the glute machines and the hip, they move in an arc, which is great because that's naturally for fitness. That's how the body naturally moves. Unfortunately, that's not what we need for acceleration, right? We need horizontal, and so we need to stay on a plane, and our bodies don't naturally like to do that. And that's where we started developing a way to use the synchro system and use the isokinetic in order to try to change and force your body to be able to continue to move in that first step to be able to get more of the muscle groups that you need for hip extension versus straightening the knee out. Because in a perfect world, whatever shin angle that we start on out of our 3 or 4 point stance, depending on whether we're track or team sport athletes, we would like the femur to arrive on that plane, right? But typically, if you see most of the time, most athletes, they do that in the beginning, and then there becomes a point where the path of least resistance is for the shin to go onto the angle of the femur. And that creates a great discrepancy in your contact, where you contact the ground. And that is, if you don't fix that, there's, you're kind of paddling up water in that sense. And that's why we focus so much on that first step, like Chris is, to back him up on that one.
So is it isokinetics, or is it isometric, or is it ballistic? What are you guys looking at there? Or is it all of them?
Well, because it's so easy to change it on the synchro, it's just a couple buttons away. So we'll do all. It's easy to do if you have a synchro. And again, I know it's a 1080 thing, so I guess I can pub 1080 stuff and not get in trouble, for all the people out there that get crabby about things like that. But yeah, you just click a couple buttons. And so if you've got the synchro, you've got one kid that it's going to be, I'm going to try to cut you down. So when you push out on one leg, I've got it doubled up. I'm going to cut you down to 1.5 meters a second because I want you to get to 3. And, and then I'm going to do really light. Cal's really good at changing the velocity of the line coming out to 0.3 meters a second or 0.8 meters a second. And so it's so easy to just change around. I know Cal does blocks, but I don't have to. I'm like Matt. I have a couple of kids, so I don't have to follow a block and get 40 kids through at once. So I can move around pretty good. But like what Matt said, it's all about getting a horizontal drive. And so, going into track season now, you can't get that horizontal drive without a good push off that back leg. I coach kids, that back leg pushes that knee down and gets your hips out in front. And then hopefully you keep everything down when you push forward. And I think both Cal and Matt are right. You're looking for that little bump. You're looking for the little micro bumps in that line as it comes out. And that helps give you an idea what you do. And not to keep going at Matt here, but one thing that I do use that I stole from him, it's not nearly as good as his, but he has and I don't know if he still has this because I haven't been down there in a while, but that chart that you have that you do your starts on, and it shows you the line of where your hip's supposed to be and then your distance and where your hip is supposed to be and your foot hits the ground. I have a really cheap knockoff version of that made out of PVC pipes, which again, I'm half-assing everything that you're making because I don't have cool stuff like you do. But I'm trying to do the same thing where you give a kid an angle or a target of where they need to be. And I think that helps let them know where they should be.
Yeah, we developed that about 15 years ago. And we've been using the Sprint for 10 years now because we had that prototype that wasn't in the United States, I'm sure, but we used that 10 years ago. And now, so we had that. It was really cool because we'd been using that already for about 5 years once we got the Sprint, and then we could line up the data across from it and like video in front of it. So what he's talking about is we made a thing called a start chart. And it was basically because one of the things when you're working with athletes, it doesn't matter what you know, doesn't matter the sport. You could be the best golf instructor. Everything about the golf swing. The only thing that matters is what result you can extract from the athlete. So to us, the knowledge is the base part of it. Figuring out how to extract that from the athlete is where the art comes in and where you have to get outside of the box. So the start chart was we just filmed in front of this chart from a 3 or 4 point stance, depending on what their athlete was doing. And then you have bars for how far the hips are actually traveling. So you could have, it was in 1 foot increments. Then you had goals, right? So if your hip got to 2 feet, then it showed you. And one of it was to demonstrate and to teach people the reality of the physics of it. So it's like, okay, so Newton's third law of motion. Oh, I didn't run faster. I didn't try harder. I didn't move quicker. But wait, my hip is where it was at the 2 foot mark. Now it's at the 3 foot mark. And that's when we tell the kid, like, well, guess what that is? That's called.
Hey, Adam, I just sent you a copy.
Nice.
So what I sent you is my version, and then I have, sorry, Matt, I have a picture of his. Can I show it, Matt?
Yeah. And it's one of the most basic things, but I can tell you it was a game changer for us. It's sometimes the most simple things possible become absolute game changers. And it changed because different athletes learn different, right? You have athletes that learn, you can explain things to some people and they'll go execute it. And then some people need visual cues. And then some people need physical cues. That's where like the sprint comes in. When you attach somebody to the sprint, we call that like, that's a physical cue to get you to do something because you can feel it. So some people can feel things. And then some people are very cerebral and they come back and look at the data and they're like, I'm going to change that. And then you have just competitive people too. So, or the perfect one is the rarity. You get all of that together. And that's what we call the outliers, which we don't usually like to use as examples. But yeah, the start chart was the precursor to the 1080 was basically became the virtual kind of start chart. Like you could see a lot of what we were looking at through the 1080. But using the start chart was good though as well because it's a video that the athlete can look at and see sense to them. And they can see if they get too vertical or what have you.
Yep. And I'll pull that up here in a second. I'll so everybody can see it. Cal, I wanted to go back when we lost you. You were talking about the TFL and the glute med, and then also talking about the between 10 and 20 meters, or 10 and 20 yards, 20 and 30 yards, breaking those down in different phases. Did you want to continue with your train of thought on that?
Yeah, and really, I mean, that was kind of where I'm going with my profiling because I realized like the load shouldn't be if I'm training a 10 to 20 or a 0 to 10. The load needs to be different than obviously training the 20 to 30. So I'm breaking those down. And then, I undulate things during the week. So the load can be manipulated within that zone, whatever I'm trying to do, whether I'm training top end speed or acceleration. And then, when we're talking about blips and stuff the discrepancies. So the glute med, like where I go now is I try to figure out, well, if somebody has a running flaw or there's a blip in this whole thing, what muscles are tied together and what ones aren't working, and I essentially can run 20 some muscle tests on the lower body to figure out, hey, this hamstring's not working well today. Maybe this is the interaction between the hamstring and glute is the reason we're seeing this fluctuation, right? And then what can I do to maybe fix it? And maybe there's nothing because in my world, a lot of times the kids took a puck in the hamstring. So there's just a bruise in there that we just can't get rid of. But at least I picked it up and I knew what was going on at that time. So I'm using all those instances to say, hey, and to get back to the glute med and the TFL, like I can't believe how many times I fixed this, right to left leg discrepancies with that. Now, does it always stay day to day? No, because then you got more layers to peel back, whether it's a hip out of place or tell them to go to the chiro and get some things adjusted, right? But when and realistically, like I've told too many people now, just get rid of your force plates and buy a 1080 because the 1080 can tell me load on the first step, right? If there's a problem on the first step, and it can tell me running my kids at 8 meters per second down the track. So like it tells me problems in every major variance of running, where the force plate is just one snapshot, right? And I'm just like any major team I deal with, I'm like, you got to buy the 1080 because that's your screening tool. You can train with it. It's not just a testing tool, right? Well, I mean, I'll give you one quick example. Like I had a female that was cleared to play, and she did an isokinetic test, and force plates seemed to be within 10%. But when she was running, her force output was 35% at high velocity on the 1080. One leg was 35% less, but she's cleared. So I take that snapshot. I explained to the team doctors and trainers, right? she can't produce force at high velocity. She shouldn't be cleared. Well, they uncleared her. And then with training on the 1080, obviously, at high velocities, it didn't take long to fix it. Right. But her strength was fine. I'll give them 10% to return to play, right? After a major knee injury. But the problem is at high velocity, she was 35%.
Right.
So then your pattern, we know her patterns are so messed up. Like, and the trainer came over and watched the tests. And they're like, she's like, oh, we can't clear her. I'm like, exactly. Once she saw that, my trainer's really good. They knew it. But the doctors and the physical therapists ran their tests and like, oh, great, she's cleared. She wasn't even close. And then we did a change of direction on the 1080, and she was above 40 on deficit on that. So you're going, can this athlete really play? No, she was going to be so set up, you know, and it was more or less the athlete's fault because she didn't go through the proper rehab, and she got cleared through the summer. She thought biking and you know, a bike class with her mom was optimal rehab versus actually doing something.
A little
real.
Orange Theory.
Yeah, a little Orange Theory or whatever. And I'm sure that's a great workout place.
And
You know what I
share
mean? I'm
and
sure it's
share
great.
yoga.
Yeah. So anyway, but the point is like, look, there is more variations of testing that you can do with this 1080. I wouldn't even look at a force plate anymore if I was a coach, right? I'd buy two 1080s and run with it in minimum. And I got 4.
Yeah, I mean, we see that all the time, Cal. It's like the return to play protocols, you're cleared, and it's like cleared to do what? Because they're as strong as they were, but it's the rate of force development doesn't quite come back yet. And we had a kid tore ACL and, you know, would fly home from college in order to do rehab. And he would, you know, ended up, oh, look at that. That's the start chart from back in the day. That's what he was talking about, Korfist. So the ability to be able to sprint at month, you know, 3.5, with having 10 kilos on or what have you is such a great advantage from the rehab standpoint. I think that's one of the greatest benefits of the tool. But, you know, when we first looked at the 1080 and the 1080 data that was coming out of it, when we got the first prototype, there was just so much data. It was, what do you do with this? And so we very quickly were like, well, we need to come up with something relevant. And so we kind of just we got really lucky. We made up a number. We started doing a test with 10 kilos, 20 meters, and just testing it out on everybody. And we did that. And now we still do that 10 years later. Now we're starting to do some, you know, the person who has just shattered the records on that over 10 years doing, God, we use the 1080, probably 50, 60 times a day for 10 years. We start to really understand what those numbers look like. And one of the things that we see is the patterns become almost like a fingerprint on someone and their tendencies and what they do with certain loads. And so then you can, even though, for instance, the standard test we have with 10 kilos, 20 meters, that could be too much load for someone to really get performance on versus someone else that's maybe not enough for what you're trying to do in acceleration. But what it does do is it lets us see what it is, and we have enough data now that we can reverse engineer that and say, oh, here's where they are. This would be their optimal training load, what have you. So to what he's saying about the rehab aspect of that, I mean, yeah, it being able to see data on a force plate, sorry, and their strength and is completely different than being able to their nervous system being ready to fire. Because one of the things we see is there's the rate of force, but then there's also the coordination that hasn't quite come back yet. And you can get strong, but not get the coordination back in order to be able to do the movements that you need for your sport. And that's I think a big aspect that you can see at different loads and different speeds. So we'll use heavy loads to slow them down when they're not ready for that, to develop their coordination back, and then gradually make them lighter and lighter as they get better, as they progress. That's my 2 cents on that.
You can even start to see the coordination things in an acceleration where, you know, the frequency is horrible when they're coming out of the hole. And then when they get up to speed, they're okay. And so, you know, then you can kind of narrow it down and say, all right, your top end speed is great, but man, your legs aren't moving at all when you're coming out. And so you can really use that graph and the tools that you have to look at that. There's my homemade version.
Look at that.
I'm good with PVC. I'm a master of PVC.
No hate, no hate. Look at that hip projection. His hip goes down. All right, we see that hip gets a little rise there. Not bad. Looks like he got about 2.5 feet there.
I think
Could I chime in a little bit?
it cost you a quarter, Ola.
Yeah, I know. I'm hiding in the dark here. No, there was a question that came in. I know this is after a turn, but this goes out to you, Cal. So from a 0 step after a change of direction, because you touched upon it with return to play, return to sport, the rehab component. Do you look at that in the 0 step, quote unquote, for the change of direction as well? And the question here comes from someone in hockey and
Yeah.
you know, specific to that. Specific to hockey.
Yeah, I actually, we ran a bunch of tests on that. And so, you know, the big thing I think I noticed, which I have to look into more, and this summer we're going to test the whole summer on this, change of direction, you know, and like, I think I can predict some big things with it. If they start with isometric position versus coming in and change of direction reactive. And, you know, you're going to be able to look at it in that position, that explosive deficit using a reactive change of direction versus a static, right? And I think I can come up with a simple parameter. And what I did see when I tested I did 50 samples of 50 people. I did see that a level of that really intrigues me, because if they have a 0 start with no or 0 step with no momentum or no reactiveness, and then I get the reactiveness, then I know what type of things we need to work on. You know what I mean? Like, so when I say that, like if there's a huge deficit between reactive starts and an isometric start with no rebound effect, it's a straight push, then I know that I need more isometric strength in that position to come out of the hole. So 1080 is going to screen that for me. So then if the isometric push is poor compared to the reactive, if there's some ratio that's off, if it's lacking, then I know I need more. Obviously, I need more isometric in the lateral start position, whatever position you want from the 0 step. And then if the reactive is not enough deficit from the isometric force, then we know we need more reactive training, plyometrics, whatever it may be, and high speed stuff. But again, then that goes back to reactiveness of stability, because if I go back to those 2 muscles, if those 2 muscles are off, the glute med and the TFL muscle test, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can just go on YouTube, Google it, just test the athlete, put them on the thing. If that leg's off, these and really these are slings. It's a lateral sling in the RPR course, and it's the spiral sling. And if those 2 are off, then there's going to be a deficit in the reactive when they go to change directions. Because here's the deal. If the brain, when you go to change directions at a high speed and the brain says, I am unstable in this limb, it will downregulate your ability to stop. It will downregulate your ability to apply force coming out. So again, I'm telling you, so many people have called me. We're like, hey, we're training this guy extra on this leg and nothing's happening. Check these 2 things. I literally show them on video or my phone. They're, FaceTiming me, and they fix those and the deficit's gone. So like, yes, I'm working on that this summer. I probably will run one summer I got 250,000 different numbers on people. So I'll probably get about 100,000 to 200,000 numbers on that, because I got 4 1080s that I can get its test on everybody every day of the week. So I hope that answers the question.
I think that 0 step, one thing, thinking about team sports, 0 step is great when you're going straight ahead for track and field or you got a free release. But I also think it's important Can you get it? What's your velocity at 0 step in about 140-degree arc in front of you? Because sometimes you're not going to get a free run in team sports. And so that's another thing that I've been kind of playing with some soccer players and working with some NFL teams. And we're talking about that is, can we get that? Can we hit that threshold or past that threshold in different angles as well? Because I think it's the same. Whether you're going to the left or the right or this angle or that angle, you still have that threshold that you have to get through to set up the rest of your run.
Well,
Oh,
we see the best
totally.
athletes do it, right? We see the best athletes do it.
Yeah.
No, totally. I've been looking at those exact data, Chris. Like, give them different conditions and see how they behave and see when they fall apart.
But I think,
different start conditions.
yeah, you just have to alter your feet a little bit, and feet work a
Yep.
little different, but
Yep.
still,
Yep.
you've got to still hit those. The principles are the same.
Yep, I agree.
That's a question. Okay. So thinking NFL football, and Chris, you and I talked about this a little bit. I don't think I ever got you to answer it, so I'm going to have you answer it now because you had an answer. I see a lot of running backs line up in the backfield, and they're very vertical, right? And I know that's what their coach wants them to do so that they can read the defense and different things. But do you train an athlete that's going to be a running back different than a wide receiver that's going to be starting in a traditional wide receiver 2-point stance compared to that running back that's more upright?
Yeah, I'll give them their false steps, but I think I'm going to measure after that false step. I can't show you some video, but yes, we add false steps and things like that, and then measure after that point because it's going to be the same.
But you would train them. I mean, like right, we're talking about starts, right? Horizontal projection. You would still train that athlete that way in the off season, knowing that they may never even start in that position as a running back for a certain team.
I think initially, yes, just so you get a feel for your body positions are, because I think there's an element to that too, that it has to feel right. It can't feel awkward, because if you feel awkward, you're going to go, instead of power mode, you're going to go stability mode, and you're going to lose. Because your body goes, it's one or the other. If you feel unstable, you shut down pretty quick. Cal, didn't you just do a YouTube or something on that?
What? If you don't have stability?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've been talking about it a while, right? If, as you know, Chris, the foot, if the foot's not stable when they land and it's weak, then the body down regulates things. You know what I mean?
You stand up, because that's the first thing you do is when you don't have stability is you stand up.
Well, yeah, and you down regulate, right? Your brain will down regulate you without even, thinking. So, but going back to when Matt talked about the injuries and return to play, like one of the things that when he talks about coordination, one of the tools I have a TMG, tensiomyograph, and I throw people on when we see that lack of coordination. They may have strength, and it's really what happens is it's the muscle can't relax, right? The speed at which it relaxes was so long. So what you have is when you're running, you have muscles with that lack of coordination that are carrying too much tension when you're trying to do the normal cycling of the leg. And especially on the return to play. And I'm fortunate that I had a device to actually point that out. But when you see things that aren't coordinated, it's really, there's too much tension. Now, were they in a boot and the calves carrying too much tension because they were in a boot, which now tightens the hamstring up when they're trying to run? Yeah, I've seen that happen. So then what fixed it? A calf massage on that person. And then the hamstring loosened up when they ran, or the contraction speed, and then they seemed more coordinated. So it's it might not be the injury itself. It could be the byproduct of the injury, but the relaxation factor in this whole thing is what separates the best humans on the planet when they're the best in their sport. They relax faster the muscles that aren't being used, and that's coordination.
Okay, so that drives me where I want to go next, which is I want to talk. We have about 20 minutes left, guys. Good conversation. Let's talk a little bit about assisted sprinting or pulling people. So obviously with the 1080, There's other devices too, but the 1080 is known for its assisted sprint ability. Um, Chris, you have research with your name on it, with some other very smart people. I think there's a lot of misnomers around it. What I want to bring up right now is, okay, for that coordination pattern, like Cal was talking, like, do you use assisted sprinting to improve coordination? Because there's a lot of coaches I work with that will never touch assisted sprinting until they feel like the resisted acceleration part is taken care of. And I know there's different opinions out there. So I'd love just to hear a little bit of discussion, what you guys think about when do you include assisted sprinting? Does it help with coordination, front side mechanics? Like, how do we use it?
Well, I would use it every day if I could. There's nothing like it. I think people who don't use it are afraid of it. But you don't have to go super max. I mean, you could just give them that impetus to go to turn over faster, and that's good enough. And then the releases are great. God, it was during COVID I did one of these, and there's a Japanese researcher who came on, and he talked about how important the releases are at overspeed, and then all of his work disappeared. And I don't know what happened to him, but he was really good. He was really interesting. So the question is, do I use it? I do. When do I know it's too much? When I hear, well, you can see it on the machine or you can hear it. If I see heel strikes, they're going too fast. But my cue is, and how do I change that? Instead of attaching at the belly, I attach at the chest. That way you've got to get your hips underneath you. And something minor. Again, I'm not pulling people at 12 meters a second. But I'm getting them to go fast and let them feel fast. And then I let go because I've got the releasers. But you can do running drills with it. With my NFL guys, they love doing their running drills over speed. Put a water bag on their back, and now their spine has to work really fast to balance everything. They love that stuff. And plus, it's safe. There was a paper that recently came out that talked about how safe it was to hit max speed velocities without a lot of strain on your hamstrings. There's been a lot of really good papers that have come out in the last 3 years on overspeed stuff.
One of the things we use it for, which is we've been experimenting with a couple of years ago, was bounding over speed.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
Yeah,
That's a
so
really good one.
we bound because we're trying to train acceleration. So we want you to be able to hold bound positions for longer, because the sooner you start to cycle, right, obviously you're going to go into your max velocity longer. So we want people to be able to have acceleration, force production mechanics for longer periods of time. And so we'll do bounding where they're having to control and still bound at higher velocities than what they can, which now you take it off and you go do an acceleration phase of it, and all of a sudden they're able to produce force a lot faster than they were, or just even the coordination and the, like Cal was talking about, being able to relax certain muscles at different speeds.
And that is, bounding over speed is great for coordination.
Yeah.
Drill.
Yeah. Turning off, turning on,
impact.
turning off, turning on.
And I think that's another thing that people forget about is with the overspeed stuff is, why not pull someone in an acceleration? Why do you have to get up to speed and go? Why can't you pull them from that low position right out of the gate? And it doesn't have to be super far. But again,
Well, our
it's
track,
that
our facility,
coordination.
85. So
Yeah, you have a short stop though.
yeah,
Don't
we have
you?
85.
Because you have yours at the end, and then you've got that 85 yards.
We have to grab some people sometimes, swoop them up. It's okay.
Hey, did you put a roof over that too?
I did, yeah. We have an indoor track now in Texas, private indoor. Yeah. Yeah, it was fun.
That looked
so
cool.
to get back on the overspeed piece of it, I think, there's such a difference between, I feel like, an overspeed treadmill versus the 1080 overspeed. I feel like it's a more natural, more of a translatable modality, plus the teaching piece of it is there. I mean, you can crank somebody up and throw them on a treadmill and they can, run
20,
a few
30 miles an hour.
Yeah, and it's like, well, okay, it's not quite the same. But with that, we can see such minute progressions too. So you can start somebody off, you already know what their max velocity is, so you can just add a tiny bit more. And that worked out okay. They did well. They didn't completely heel strike or completely get out of position and start braking. Because what we want to see is get them comfortable with not braking, not decelerating. Because kind of like what Cal was talking about, your body's going to stop you if you can't, produce force at that rate. Your body's going to not let you go at that rate. But here's something that we think that everyone should be doing in track and field that are in the jumps is overspeed for long jump.
Yeah,
Because we want to go in and say, okay, what is your best velocity that you hit the board with? What's your sweet spot? Okay, well then you're gonna, well, why is that? Why is that my sweet spot? And then if you can train and have it just maybe uptick a little bit of velocity and have them practice hitting the board, have them practice overcoming that velocity and creating that their better long jumps, I think it will, when they're running by themselves, it makes it so much easier because they're just chilling. I mean, they're running, a couple of miles an hour slower than they were. So being able to hit that board and transfer that energy is going to be a piece of cake for them versus if you always, and I, that's what, because we were first thought about it with GPS, like, why aren't long jump coaches using GPS to see what people's best jumps are? Like, what is the velocity that they hit the board with? I mean, it's such an easy thing, I feel like, for teams to be able to use to say, okay, like what is it? Okay, what are your steps? But why? Like, you need to know why. And like, okay, why is this guy, jumps in track and field are so sensitive, they're so delicate. Like, one day a guy's jumping 3-4 feet difference. Well, we can find out why. What's their sweet spot? What's their velocity hitting the board, and what should it be? And then how do you increase that? How do you make it more comfortable for them to hit at a higher velocity? Because if they can hit the board at a higher velocity, then obviously we're, PRing.
Are you doing?
Yeah.
Are you doing that into the jump at like with a speed belt, releasing them, or are you just doing that on your track surface?
We
where
have the
you're picking 'em up
manual
the
one, but we've been waiting for our belt. Like,
We need to talk to Mr. Peter about
wait,
this.
yeah, but
Speed belt.
we're
Yes, yes.
waiting on it. It's this electronic remote control belt. Sounds like a dream. Gosh,
Yeah.
wish I had one of those.
Cal, did you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. Over the year, you hear so many people talk about overspeed, don't like it or whatever. I don't know where that came from, because I'll be honest with you. People look into my training. Like, I got kids at 6:30 in the morning. They do about a couple minutes RPR, and they'll do one goat drill, and then we're running at 103%, right? So I was fortunate to have one female that she had a broken bone in her foot for 3 years because she chose not to get surgery because it would keep her off a national team. She was a hockey player. She had having a boot. Well, she always, to start a workout, she'd always have certain muscles off. And one day we overspeed, we did overspeed with her. And lo and behold, one rep of overspeed turned every muscle on that was always shut off on her. And so then I started doing experiments. I would just go, okay, hey, I don't want you to RPR today. Let me test all your muscles. It takes me 30 seconds to figure out like 20 some muscles in the leg. And I find, okay, you got 3 of these off today. And, and it might be because they skated a bunch and they're sore. So they may have 7 muscles off. So actually I had a kid with 7 muscles off. That I would say this weren't working optimally. We go upstairs. He runs overspeed, 1 rep, 10 fly. I put him back on the table and every one of those muscles were turned on. And I went, like, the brain, you know what? The brain overrode some safety mechanisms, it appears, to say, hey, if I'm going this fast, I have to literally let go of any inhibitions or any compensations I got to make sure I can do this right. Actually perform it. So to me, I'm like, it's a powerful tool for turning things on and getting the brain. I've even seen it improve vision function when I test that stuff. Of course, right? It makes sense when Chris and I, with our backgrounds, going, of course it does. The brain went, there is so much going on here in this overspeed. I got to turn everything on. I got to open up everything for survival, basically. And it sounds horrible, like but like it's just profound to me how. And I would love to go back and talk to coaches. I just don't do overspeed. I think it ruins technique. Well, what'd you test and what'd you video? Show me. And odds are nobody ever tests anything. Nobody ever videos anything. They just came up with some, assumption.
Yeah, because Charlie Francis said it in 1978.
Yeah, right. Well, I guarantee you Charlie would be using a 1080. So.
Well, if you teach technique, that shouldn't be a concern. Technique. I think that's our job. Our job is to teach technique. So why would you have anyone doing anything without using technique, whether it's overspeed or underspeed? Okay, that's our job.
I'm gonna chime in. You came up a little comment and a little question here. It was you, Matt, on the long jump and the approach speed and what have you. Because if you look at, approach speed is obviously important for sure, but it's also the exit speed, the horizontal exit speed. Because when Carl Lewis, I remember this paper, I think it was Xceleration, like back in the day, and you look in his book there, you see the entry speed by definition prior to Carl Lewis was the fastest man alive, but he wasn't the fastest man entering, the plank for the long jump, but he was the fastest one leaving. So looking at the combination of the entry versus the leaving there, I think would be, I think it opens up some very interesting conversations and doors for sure. For sure.
And I think different athletes would respond differently to it. Like they
Yep.
just like you said with Carl Lewis, a lot of people get it done differently, like just based on their physical qualities. I feel like.
Yeah, I think that would. I think that'd be an indicator, like, of muscle quality and tendon quality on that person interacting, right? So he didn't come in as fast, but he left faster, right? That would have to tell me that, I think his tendon quality might have been a little bit higher in that particular situation, right? Versus the other guy that came in faster, his muscles might be propelling him more. Well, his muscle, not more, but like there's an inverse like reaction here. So let's say I'm just throwing out numbers. Let's say 70% of the energy by Carl Lewis was displayed by his tendon to come out of there, right? Where the other guy, if he came in faster and left slower, he might be at 65% tendon use and 35%. But like, that's what I'm talking, like, so there's really, I think that's what would, I call it my two spring model theory. Somebody can look it up, but I found it in throwers, like when I really discovered it with squat jumps and things like that. But really, that's what we're looking at. And is that genetics? I probably would assume so. It could be a little bit of fast twitch fiber content, but I would assume it's more genetics, right? With the tendon muscle makeup. That's just my thoughts. I mean, I'm not a great high jump or a long jumper, so.
Yeah, just to be clear on that one too, though, it's like there's a loss at the plank. The question is how much, how much do I?
Sure.
Yeah, how much?
Y'all lose.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think people with that get it done more with tendons are more likely to have a higher exit velocity to support what Cal is saying on that.
Right, but
versus the more muscular.
Yeah, right. But if the muscle can't withstand the force to allow the tendon to be stretched, then they're going to slow up even more at takeoff, right? Does that make sense? So your muscle has to like be able to withstand that force at impact so that it can actually stretch the tendon. So then Carl Lewis could take off more. So fast twitch fibers for sure, but even I mean, I don't even know if fast twitch fibers matter that much because there's going to be tension in that muscle when it lands with the slow twitch fibers. So the slow twitch fibers will already be contracted when they go to touchdown, right? So there'll be tension already in there. And then because of what's just going to happen. So yeah, I think it's a good interaction. There's probably fast twitch fibers, tendon length, a lot of variables there, but it's interesting. Like I mean, it'd be pretty cool to actually find a definitive result on that. I mean, that's just fun shit that I geek out on, right?
I think I'd pay money to watch Cal go long jump and see if he can make it into the pit from the board.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can tell you our best athlete to ever produce power and force on the 1080 is at 175 pounds, beat all of our 6'6", 280-pound NFL tight ends, what have you. Just a whole different level when they're getting it done with the tendons.
I'm finding that too, that there's some of the most powerful people are not the people you would think are the most powerful people.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah.
Are you saying relatively?
Yeah. Pounds per
Well, I mean,
kilogram, power
when you're
per
ranking them-
kilogram, force per kilogram, but even some
Yeah.
raw numbers. I have some.
I'm
raw-
saying overall. I'm not even saying relatively. I'm saying
Right.
there's no
I would
one
agree.
of all
Yeah.
of the big athletes that we've had that are crazy, big, fast, strong. We've got this 175-pound kid that no one can touch.
Yeah.
And it's just different qualities, and it's not necessarily through muscle fiber. It's a lot of it has to do with the tendon qualities.
Yeah, tendon. Well, and then coordination layered on top of that, right? So they're highly coordinated, and the brain's already, yeah, it's magic, right? It's magic when you see that happen, right?
It's
like
insane.
I mean, you're going, and the big guy's straining and exploding, and he's got long limbs and he can move them well. But that other guy, that 175, you're going, this is like a magical dancer just applying a lot of force, right? That's that's magic.
Yeah, 15 times body weight type.
Yeah.
And it's funny when I have coaches visit and they see like they don't, like some people don't see that 175-pound kid that's producing all that force. Like when they see, oh, that guy's pretty fast, right? Well, he's way faster than everybody else, right? Some people don't see it. It's just,
they don't see it.
Yeah, they don't see it.
Never do.
Yeah, they never do. And I'm like, when I can see it without a 1080 numbers, right? I'm like, oh, wow. And they're like, what about that guy? I'm like, well, look at those numbers, right? Like, yeah.
What are you talking about? Yeah, it's funny because all our athletes and everybody throughout the years that have seen the numbers on this one guy, they're just like, what the heck? Like, how's that even possible? Like, how does he do that? It's insane.
Those are the fun ones.
A couple things to finish up, guys. This has been great conversation. One of the questions we got on the PVC, Chris, I believe you use 3 legs on that. Is there a real reason how you set it up the way you are? Does that make sense?
But what's the question on my PVC
Why
thing?
3 legs on the PVC?
Why 3 legs? You mean my stand, the part that's holding it?
Yeah. Just the best way to set it up for you.
Yeah, that's what I cut up.
I would, and then I think there was a question on overspeed research, like references. There's I don't know if you guys want to throw any out, but I've been digging in this lately. I mean, really just go to Google Scholar and you can find a bunch of different things right now. Are there any specific people, Chris, that you, I think you were talking
I don't have my papers with me, but there's some Japanese guys, there was a guy, European guy, and of course my research with Ken Clark back in the day.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I can tell you, we have a team of sports scientists that are way smarter than me, and I'm just the dumb guy that kind of holds it together somewhat. I call myself the maintenance guy over there. Things go wrong.
And I just call Chris Korfist.
but we have done, I have a whole team of guys, and we have only done private work for almost 3 decades. And the things that we've been so lucky, the things that we've been able to learn when you have an athlete for an average of 6 to 8 years is probably the average. And you get to see the changes that they make and the things that are possible. There's a lot of people in the field. There's a lot of scientists and there's a lot of research people that really don't understand or believe or have even experienced or think what is possible in our field because they haven't experienced. This athlete can go from here to here to here. And the worst athlete on any given team can become the best athlete on any given team. And people who are in sports will be like, that's crazy. You can't do that. And we see it all the time because the setup that we had. We stuck to doing only private work for a really long time because, we're not strength coaches on a team and most of our people belong to teams. So they're already doing all that. Right. So we don't want to duplicate what they're already doing.
Yeah.
And do more of the group stuff. So we get to specialize and really dive deep down into the nuances of the things that they're not. So when you're talking about research on that, I would say the proof is in the pudding. And if you look at, you can look at a lot of the data that we've extracted from our athletes and the things that we learn. Our athletes teach us stuff every day, and it just, without the data collection though, we wouldn't know.
Yeah.
And I can tell you how much we had, all the theories and all these things we had, so 10 years ago, we thought we knew what we were doing. And then we're like, well, maybe hold on a second. Maybe this, maybe that. And we might, your eyes lie to you. And we can, even on video with 240 frames per second, you can say, oh, I think they're doing that. And then we come back and look at oh, nope, that's actually not what they're doing. And so the first thing we walk into things is like, I have no idea what we're doing. And that's how you should go into it. Is like, what do you do? I don't know. Let's figure it out. And with information,
I usually do 3 drinks. I do 3 drinks and then go into it. That really helps.
that sounds like a good plan.
And you rotate them too. It's not all the same.
But at least I'm less smart at that point. So.
Awesome,
Slow it
guy.
down.
Real quick, anything? I know, Cal, I mentioned you have your #1 Amazon bestseller out right now. Congratulations. You got your new book out for people to check out, and that's called Triphasic Training 2, correct?
Yeah, it's just, it adds on and builds off. It's completely different information. Just updated stuff over the last decade. Chris played a big part of it, like the information, and yeah, you can take a look at that book. Like, I'm getting some great responses. People like all the crazy shit I put out there, they're actually going, okay, the book kind of ties it all in and makes a little bit more sense. You know what I mean? So yeah, check it out. I'm pretty pleased with it, and as long as I'm not confusing people, really, that makes me pleased with it, right? So yeah, that's a big thing. So anyway, yeah, and then I have triphasictraining.com, and then XL Athlete is some websites, and yeah, I have a lot of stuff on there. So
thanks, man. And Matt, you shared a lot of good things today, and I know we're going to get you back at one of our speed clinics coming up too. To kind of let you dive into some more of these thoughts that you presented today. But anywhere else that people can get a hold of you, social media, what's a good place?
We're, being a private facility, and I don't have a book like Cal, so I don't advise. There is a free video on YouTube. We have one video on YB Slow on YouTube that's it's just called the 0 Step. And if you ever have
really good video.
If you have trouble sleeping, it's about 42 minutes long, and it's sped up 160%. It's a little rough and rugged, but it breaks down the 0 Step in a way using the 1080 data. And if you get through that, you'll probably have a pretty good understanding of what the heck I've been talking about when I just say something that sounds kind of off the rocker. But that's it's YB Slow, all spelled out on YouTube. But we are Xceleration with an X.
There you go. Good.
Rate of change is speed.
And Chris, I'm going to give him a plug. We just put up his video from the speed clinic. So those that didn't get to make it, we cut that up and made a video. It's now available on the 1080 Motion website. So you can check that out. I think a lot of the things he talked about today, you can actually look at, because some of you guys were asking like the 0 Step and like what looks good and what doesn't look good. I would encourage you to go check out that video at 1080motion.com under webinars. And we'll also have this recording there as well soon.
Dale and I are going to try and do a Revolution in Speed this summer. And maybe Matt will want to come talk.
Yeah,
let's do it.
We don't know what city we're doing it in yet. Right now, I'm thinking Minneapolis, just because Cal knows all the good breakfast places there.
I was hoping Hawaii, but we'll go Minneapolis.
Okay, guys, thank you again for your time. Really, really appreciate it. As always, your insight. You made me think, so I appreciate that. Our next coaches conference, you can see on the screen, we'll be doing it on basketball. So we get some awesome people jumping on. I know Ola's got this put together, so we're excited to do this here in February. It'll be February 10th, and you'll be getting emails. If you join this webinar, you will get an email and an invite so you can sign up. So guys, have a good night. Thank you very much. Make speed happen. Talk to you guys later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.